Welcome to EcoFun's video on globalization. This video will demonstrate the overview of the nature and process of globalization. So what is globalization? The shift toward a more integrated and interdependent world economy is referred to as globalization. The globalization of markets and the globalization of production are two aspects of globalization. First, the globalization of markets. Falling barriers to cross-border trade and investment have made it easier to sell internationally, as well as global tastes and preferences of consumers in different nations are beginning to converge on some global norm. Some examples include Citigroup credit cards, Coca-Cola soft drinks, and etc. It also benefits small and large companies. For example, in Germany, 98% of small and mid-sized companies have exposure to international markets via either exports or international production. Furthermore, there are still existing significant differences between national markets, including consumer tastes and preferences, distribution channels, culturally embedded value system, business system, and legal regulations. Products that serve universal needs are often global, such as commercial jet aircraft, computer software, Apple's iPhone, and etc. Additionally, competitors may not change among nations. In many global markets, the same firms frequently confront each other as competitors in nation after nations. For example, Coca-Cola versus PepsiCo, Ford versus Toyota, Boeing versus Airbus, and more. Second, the globalization of production. Globalization of production means sourcing goods to take advantage of differences in cost and quality of factors of production. For example, some 30% of the Boeing 777 by value is built by foreign companies. Early outsourcing was confined to manufacturing activities. Technology now uses outsourcing. Many software companies, including Microsoft, now use Indian engineers to perform test functions on software design in the United States. So, what drives globalization? Declining trade and investment barriers. Many of the world's nation-states established substantial obstacles to international trade and foreign direct investment during the 1920s and 1930s. The formation of high tariffs resulted in retaliatory trade policies, which contributed to the Great Depression of the 1930s. After World War II, the industrial nations of the West aimed to progressively lower the barriers through the General Agreement of Tariffs and Trade, also known as GATT. With a total of 8 rounds of negotiation, the first went into effect in 1948 and the most recent, Uruguay round, were completed in 1993. The Uruguay round also established the World Trade Organization to oversee the global trading system, knowledge society, and trade agreements. The value of the world trade in merchandise goods have grown consistently faster than the growth rate in the world economy since 1950. Trade across country borders is 2.6 times higher than the world production. Knowledge society has produced more informed consumers, driving demand, removal of restrictions to foreign direct investment, as well as more trade agreements. Role of technological change. Communications. The development of the microprocessor facilitated the rapid expansion of high-performance, low-cost computers, significantly boosting the quantity of data that individuals and businesses can process. Moore's law predicts that the power of microprocessor technology doubles and its cost of production falls in half every 18 months. Internet of Things. Half the world population uses the internet. Global e-commerce sales over $2 trillion in 2017. The internet is viewed as an equalizer, as it rolls back some of the constraints of scale, location, and time zone. Transportation technology. Additionally, commercial jet travels, super freighters, and containerization significantly reduce the time and labor required for global transport and shipping. The changing demographics of the global economy, the changing world output and world trade picture. The US has experienced a relative decline, reflecting the fast economic growth of several other economies. China and the BRIC countries are growing more rapidly. Developing nations may account for more than 60% of the world economic activity by 2025. Non-US firms are increasingly investing across national borders, desiring to disperse production and activities to optimal location and to build a direct presence in major foreign markets. The changing nature of the multinational enterprise. In 2003, 38.8% of the world's 2,000 largest multinationals were US firms. By 2017, 27% of the top 2,000 global firms are now US multinationals, a drop of 236 firms. A multinational enterprise, MNE, is any business that has productive activities in 2 or more countries. Furthermore, mini multinationals, medium and small-sized multinationals are also on the rise, with the internet lowering barriers. The changing world order. Former communist countries present export and investment opportunities with signs of growing unrest and totalitarianism. China is moving to become an industrial superpower, while Latin America debt and inflation are down with more private investors and expanding economies. The globalization debate. Demonstrations against globalization date back to 1999, when protesters blocked the streets of Seattle in order to shut down the WTO meeting. The protesters stressed the detrimental effects on job losses, living standards, wage rates, and the environment. globalization, jobs, and income. Critics of globalization argue that falling trade barriers allow firms to move manufacturing activities to countries where wage rates are much lower, which destroys manufacturing jobs in wealthy advanced economies. Services also being outsourced, contributing to higher unemployment and lower living standards in their home nation. Supporters argue that the benefits outweigh the cost. Free trade will result in countries specializing in the production of goods and services that they can produce most efficiently, while importing goods and services that they cannot produce as efficiently. As a result, the whole economy is better off and companies can reduce their cost structures and consumers benefit. Globalization, labor policies, and the environment. Critics argue that labor and environmental regulations put firms in advanced nations at a disadvantage because they must adhere to the regulation, while firms in less developed nations do not have to comply to such regulations. Essentially, adhering to regulations increases costs, while the lack of regulations can lead to abuse. Supporters argue that tougher environmental regulations and stricter labor standards go hand in hand with economic progress. As countries get richer, they enact tougher environmental and labor regulations. Globalization and national sovereignty. Critics argue that the power is shifted from national governments towards supranational organizations, such as the WTO, the EU, and the United Nations, while supporters argue that the power of supranational organizations is limited to what nation-states collectively agree to grant. These organizations exist to serve the collective interests of the member states. Globalization and the world's poor. Critics argue on issues such as gap between the rich and poor nations has gotten wider, totalitarian government, poor economic policies, corruption and lack of property rights, expanding population in developing countries, debt burdens, while the supporters argue that the best way to change the situation is to lower barriers to trade and investment and promote free market policies. That is all for this video. Thanks for watching.